Donald Trump has been ad-libbing a warning that we are now in a calm before the storm, which may not mean anything, but it does come as Trump is in open war with his own Secretary of State, which means it may mean something. In fact, it was just last Friday, you may recall, when Trump ousted his health care chief. Rex Tillerson did make it through this Friday evening, which wasn't certain, according to Axios, reporting today Trump was seething when he returned from his Las Vegas trip and then, quote, saw Tillerson's gaffe-dominating cable news coverage. Everywhere he flipped, there was Tillerson's face instead of his. The relationship so toxic, few in the White House think it can be rebuilt. Trump is considering firing Tillerson and giving Mike Pompeo the job, which would leave a vacancy, of course, at the CIA. But apparently, quote, Trump recognizes a cabinet shuffle would bring bad press. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly wants stability, they write, and so is discouraging high-level departures before next year. Today in Puerto Rico, Vice President Mike Pence was asked by NBC News about his confidence in Tillerson. He said, quote, oh, sure, and then repeated that phrase when pressed about his confidence in Tillerson. So that's the staff drama. Then, of course, there's the Trump drama. Today, reporters asking Trump about his bizarre reference to the calm before the storm, and he winked.
Mr. President, what did you mean by calm before the storm yesterday? What did you mean by that?
Thank you very much. You'll find out.
What was that? I mean, we don't know. And a lot of people asked the White House spokesperson, who didn't have an answer and instead tried to flip the script and argue this is all part of Trump's mysterious wait-and-see approach to foreign policy.
Was he referring to military action when he said calm before the storm?
As we've said many times before, I know the president has, as I have from this podium on quite a few occasions. We're never going to say in advance what the president's going to do. And as he said last night, in addition to those comments, you'll have to wait and see.
Now, there could be a good chance that Trump didn't actually mean anything by it. Maybe he was ad-libbing or just trying to stir up drama. But when it comes at the very time that he is publicly undercutting his chief diplomat's efforts to defuse this nuclear-related feud with North Korea, what do we do with the chance that Trump did mean something by it? And then there's the over-organizing question, the one that comes up a lot when you talk politics these days. Does any of this matter? There is a cliche I know I hear from people sometimes that, well, Trump supporters just stick with him no matter what. But a lot of cliches, they're just not true. Look at today's new AP poll. Donald Trump, right now, after all this, hitting his lowest approval marks ever. 67% of Americans disapprove. Only 32%, I should say, approve. And on a day when Trump issued a new rule limiting health care coverage for women, note, those numbers do have a major gender gap. His approval among women even lower. A recent CNN poll puts it at just 27%, far lower than how he rates with men. Joining me now is Dionne, opinion writer for The Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst and co-author of the new book, One Nation After Trump. Neera Tanden, a president of the Center for American Progress and a former aide to Hillary Clinton, and Daniel Dale, Washington correspondent for the Toronto Star. So much to get to. Neera, I give you open season, both on the gender gap and please speak, if you would, to this approach to foreign policy, these dramatic comments and the Tillerson feud.
You know, I actually think these two issues are related. I think there are a lot of women who are fearful about what the Trump administration is doing, fearful about what Donald Trump himself is just rattling off at any given time. On a weekend, you could be out with your kids and you come back home and all of a sudden he seems to have threatened war with North Korea. Seems to be taking joy in the idea that we'd all be worried about him having a war with somebody. I think a lot of women look at this administration and say it's attacking the issues that we care about, but also that he's completely unstable, and that is a national security threat. It's an issue of security, and I think his comments yesterday only give rise to the idea that this is entirely dysfunctional in every way, shape, and form.
EJ, Neera is suggesting that there is a type of enjoyment in the way the president can keep everyone in this suspended animation, which is especially bizarre when you have the powers of the presidency, because by definition, everyone is in that suspended animation. The fact that he feels the need to stir it up, as we saw, and not walk back the comments, what do you make of it?
Well, I think you said it right earlier on when you were talking about Tillerson and the trouble he's in. The president was upset with Tillerson because he wanted to save face from Tillerson calling him a moron, which Tillerson himself has not denied. And he worried about not seeing his face, Trump, on television instead of Tillerson was there instead. And so what you're seeing, I think, in these poll numbers is a sense from Americans that this guy just doesn't take this job seriously. He thinks about ratings. He thinks about how he looks. He says stuff that could tank markets, you know, the calm before the storm. He says stuff that every other president of either party would never think of saying, because a president's supposed to be the guardian of stability. And so I think the country is very nervous, and I'm really glad you made that point at the beginning about the cliche that Trump's people won't leave him. 46% of people voted for him. He's down to 32%. Americans are paying attention to all this.
Americans are paying attention. They're making assessments. Women are clearly out the door. A lot of other groups, I mean, we sometimes slice the groups in different ways. And Daniel Dale, I'll show the Republicans number for you. Trump job approval among people who self-identify as Republicans. And by the way, we all know he's driven some people to stop self-identifying. But even among those who do now, a third disapprove, Daniel.
Yeah, I think the country can be overly fixated on the continued existence of any base for Donald Trump. So people see that, you know, there's this 30% that does stick with him, and they say, oh my gosh, how could that be? But, you know, he has been overwhelmingly unpopular from the minute he took office, and he's become more so. So I think in sort of puzzling anthropologically about, you know, who these people and why they think how they do, we can miss the forest here, which is that this is a historically unpopular president, and he's bleeding support slowly but surely.
I want to point you, Neera, as a former Hillary aide, to a Politico article about something that I think people forget. At least you tell me if I'm wrong, but something I've noticed in talking to folks who work in Washington and across administrations is on substance and on policy, not on the politics. Yeah. There is a desire sometimes to try to be supportive of other people who are serving in the government, right? Mm-hmm. So you might not choose to serve Donald Trump, but there's a sort of a camaraderie around the service to the nation. And I say that in teeing up what I'm going to read to you, which is John Kelly was named White House Chief of Staff in July. His predecessor in the job, Rahm Emanuel, who you know, called the office to wish him luck and offer himself as a resource. Bill Daley, a former chief to President Obama, as well as other administrations, sent him a note with the same message. Kelly didn't return either. Neera.
Look, I think this administration, at every moment, this White House, this administration, every element of it has basically said that they're the administration of what they think is half the country. When Democrats have reached out, they've been rebuked. When Rahm Emanuel reaches out, he's rebuked. When in every legislative attempt, they only want to use Republicans. They've never reached out. They have the most right-wing, extreme positions on every issue. Today's contraception ruling is just part of that, but it's part and parcel of their tax plan and their health care plan and everything else, which is to govern for the hard right of this country. And I'm so glad you've mentioned the fact that he's actually bled support from his base. He had a high watermark just after the election of 46%, 45 support, opposed. He's now at 32%. So Americans are waking up. A lot of American women are waking up. A lot of those non-college women who voted for him are moving away from him because I think they see his policies as against their interests.
And to broaden that out, EJ, you know, Ta-Nehisi Coates was on earlier with my colleague Chris Hayes, and Rachel's show tonight was looking back at the year ago that was in October leading up to the campaign. Elections are scheduled. They're scheduled in the Constitution. But when they occur, it can also feel a bit like an accident. When you look at the wrong track numbers today, you imagine if this election were held now, or if we had a parliamentary system where you can have a snap election, which we don't. But if you look at it now, 74% of Americans say we are on the wrong track. I wonder, EJ, if you're our, you know, you're our, I want to say this without calling you old, but you are our most experienced commentator.
I've been around a while. It's okay.
So this is what I want to ask you as we take a step back.
He's a very young pundit.
Bless you, Neera.
As we take a step back on a Friday night and go just beyond the politics of it, what do you see when you see 74% 1 year in? Do you see a cultural assessment? Do you see a Watergate level assessment? Or point us to how you look at something like this? Because we're not usually at 3/4 of the country, even higher, I should note, than the disapproval numbers, saying this whole country, America, right now is on the wrong track.
Well, you know, I've been saying a lot over the last several months that when people compare Donald Trump to Richard Nixon, I actually think it's unfair to Richard Nixon. And the reason I say that is because Richard Nixon had some degree of seriousness about policy. He even signed bills, to go to Neera's point about working with Democrats, he signed a lot of bills that Democrats put on his desk, like to create the EPA. With Donald Trump, there is nothing like that. There is no seriousness about the job or about policy. He's gone on both sides of DACA within a few days. On some days, he wants to expand health care beyond Obamacare. On other days, he doesn't care as long as Obamacare is repealed. And so I think he's somebody who it's said that he has this solid base, but nobody out there really knows if he stands for anything. So he may be able to fall even lower than Richard Nixon did, who, after all, had about, I think it was 24% when he left office. And you wonder, given his inconstancy, if he will even hit that if he keeps going down.
Well, EJ, didn't Nixon also have a sense of shame?
He had some sense of shame. He had some. He was introspective in a lot of ways, sometimes gloomily so. And you don't sense a lot of introspection in Donald Trump.
Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what the low point is for Trump. We know that he's done a whole lot and still has retained, that core. But there's a lot still to come. I think what'll be interesting to see is whether he can pivot to campaigning for Republican congressional candidates after he's been savaging them, the guys he calls Mitch and Paul, and their band there in the House and Senate. He's been mocking them, chiding them, publicly embarrassing them, and he's going to have to depend on that group getting reelected in order for him to achieve anything. So can he succeed at doing both of those same things, both of those things at once, raging at them while also helping them get elected by his voters? It really remains to be seen.
Daniel, Dale, and EJ, Dionne, thank you both. I really appreciate it. Food for thought.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.